Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. I mean, what am I faking? You imagined it. It was clear from her voice that she was agitated and trying hard to hide her emotions. Adriana, our entire relationship, I thought I was indifferent to you, and you were with me only because you were interested in participating in the scam I offered you. When you disappeared in the morning and disappeared for a few days, I gave myself my word that I wouldn't write you a single message. Do you have any idea how hard that was for me? I started drinking before bed, but there was a fine line. If I drank a little more, I'd be on your doorstep in half an hour. If I drank less, I couldn't sleep because you fogged my judgment, and I couldn't think of anything but you. And what makes you think I'm pretending? Raising her tone slightly, Adriana asked. Now she no longer looked like a self-sufficient adult who knew the value of her time and feelings. Everything remained as it was. Adriana, why are you deceiving me? You're acting differently now. In my eyes, you're like a young girl who's overcome with jealousy. Just because you think you are, doesn't mean you are. Maybe you're the one who sees me that way. But in the eyes of others, I haven't changed. Adriana, tell me. She lay on my chest again and was silent for about 5 minutes. And then she sucked in a breath. What did she scream? What do you want to hear? That I love you? Yes, I do. Why was I acting like that? Because I didn't want to admit it to myself. I'm 40 years old. What, love? Even before we met, I believed in love. My last boyfriend looked quite solid and respectable, but in reality, he turned out to be a common Alfonso. Oh God, yes. If he'd only been an Alfonso, I wouldn't have cared so much. He humiliated me and he stole from me. Do you have any idea how I feel? I'm scared, David. I don't want what we have to turn into something more. You know, people move in and out all the time. Breakups are inevitable. Even though you know you have no future with that person, it still hurts so much when he leaves you. What makes you think that if we get back together, we'll break up? You're setting yourself up for negativity. In this case, of course, nothing good can come of it. You'll always look for faults in me. Like now, you came here for a reason. You're used to me writing you almost every day. And now I've disappeared. You didn't come here mostly because you missed me, but because you were sure I had someone. No, that's not true. Adriana looked at me with eyes of her own. She knew she was lying, and it was very obvious. Okay, you win. Yes, I'm jealous, yes. It was crazy to me when you stopped texting me. I thought you were just trying to get rid of me in my long life. I've been dumped by men a few times without saying anything. That's what annoys me the most. If you've fallen out of love, say so. If you have someone else, say so. And you look for the easiest ways, not thinking that you will bring a lot of pain to the person who loves you more than anything else in the world. Adriana, calm down. You're acting like you just ran into my apartment and found some girl in my bed, sitting on top of me. She came on top of me. I was asleep. Then I woke up and started cleaning up fast. Scattered all over the couch. What's your beef with me? Why are you acting like this? Why can't you just accept a situation where we love each other? Even if you're sure it's not forever, it might be a good idea to live in the present, not the past, not the future. If you're happy here and now with me, why should you care about what will happen in a month or a year? At that moment, I turned my eyes to Adriana and saw that tears were streaming down her cheeks. More than anything, I disliked women who cried. It had to do with the fact that I just didn't know how to act. I hugged her, kissed the top of her head, but I couldn't find the right words. You can't say the right thing when you don't know the reason for the tears. We sat on the bed for about 10 minutes, her crying on my chest and me stroking her hair. After that, I found the strength to tell her how I felt about her. The woman began to calm down. Her sobs became quieter and quieter. The tears were no longer flowing so heavily. Yes, we had such a difficult conversation a month after we met. It's very difficult when two adults with broken hearts meet and realize they have some magical feelings for each other. It's always a scary moment. I understood him like no one else because I felt the same way. I've been through betrayal and lies, but I don't want to think about it now. At that time, what I wanted most of all was to live today, to feel it as much as possible, not caring about what awaits us in a year or two. I realized that Adriana wanted the same thing, but had a lot of fear. Despite this, we started dating her. To be honest, I wanted us to move in together. However, Adriana was against it. I did not put pressure on her as I realized that she needed time to make sure that I would not bring her harm and pain. Despite this, we went on dates every day. It was a magical time for me. I enjoyed every second I spent with her by my side. Adriana really stopped being the willful person she seemed at first. She was turning into a young girl in love. I liked that so much. It seemed to me that this woman was a combination of contradictory qualities. I didn't know what to expect from her in any given situation. Sometimes she would reprimand me like a strict teacher, and sometimes she would make me steal lilacs from the flower beds. Sometimes she wanted to watch some art house movie, and sometimes she wanted me to run barefoot across the lawn. It was really quite entertaining. She'd never acted like that before. In fact, back then, she was still struggling with the warm feeling she had for me. Every date we went on ended in bed. She and I were on the move. We'd go to my apartment or hers. What struck me most was the fact that when we ended up at her apartment, there were never any children there. Adriana said that her nephew was taken by her sister, and she sent her daughter to her mother. I was interested in listening to all her conversations because I knew nothing about her family. For some reason, she kept avoiding the subject. At first, it made me tense, but then I just decided that there were more interesting conversations in the world. But when the topic was about her family, Adriana would always turn the conversation, and Elena would throw kisses at me. At the time, I was fine with that. Sometimes she stayed overnight. And this time, I especially loved, because she always got up before me to make breakfast. And it didn't matter if it was a weekend or a weekday. Most often on such days, I woke up to the ineffable aroma of freshly roasted coffee or her signature airplane. After we ate breakfast, I would get ready for work, tossing in home repairs along the way. Out of habit, I still peered through her windows the same way I did the first time. To be honest, I really wanted to see the kids there. It was a very sweet picture. When I was young, I often dreamed of having a son and a daughter. But things turned out differently. Perhaps my child is out there somewhere, but his mother has chosen to keep quiet about it. If that is the case, I do not judge this woman, because she probably does not know whose child it is. As it happens, the girls I chose were not characterized by any dignity or discretion. I spent the entire workday in torture. At some point, I was ready to take a vacation at my own expense to spend as much time as possible with my beloved. True, I was on my way to my boss to write a request, but halfway there I remembered that Adriana is not unemployed, nor can she carelessly take a vacation because she has the responsibility of her chain of pharmacies on her shoulders. I never thought that my lover would be a woman who has created such a cool business in our city. Most of all, I was surprised by the fact that she had a masterful understanding of all the drugs. She could explain what to take to get rid of any symptom, but she had no environmental or medical background. I think people like that are gifted. I asked her how she was able to gain so much useful knowledge in her business. The answer was simple. I'm just very inquisitive. Gosh, I am also very inquisitive. However, all my knowledge boils down to my profession only. I have never understood how people can simultaneously study in different faculties, have good grades, and yet not pay bribes. Apparently, Adriana was one of them. Most often after work, she and I would meet and go to some restaurant or cafe to have dinner. But what I loved the most were those moments when she invited me to her house and cooked food with her own hands. Would you know how great of a cook she is? I'm sure her dishes could be on par with some famous chefs, and everything seemed to be going well with us. But there was only one thing that bothered me the most. Somehow, since the day I met her, I'd never seen her daughter or her nephew again. It seemed to me as if she were hiding them from me. I tried to speculate as to why this might be so. However, I could not find a single adequate explanation for her behavior. I had done nothing wrong. On the contrary, I was always interested in how the children were doing, what hobbies they had, what successes they had in their studies. Adriana always responded to my questions in a curt manner and changed the subject. And when I returned to talk about the children, she began to get nervous, although she tried to hide it in every possible way. I began to reassure myself that sooner or later we would start spending time together with the children, because I was sure that we are waiting for a long and happy life together. At some point, we decided to spend a weekend together. I suggested to Adriana that we try living together. She was a little scared when she heard my proposal, but I woke up in time and realized I had said the wrong thing. At that point, all I meant was to spend Saturday and Sunday 24/7 together. It was important to me. That's when I thought I could spend as much time as possible with her daughter. And if I was lucky, my nephew would also come to visit his aunt. Adriana agreed, and I chose the place myself. I didn't want it to be one of our apartments. I wanted this weekend to be something special. I chose an incredibly beautiful chalet by the river. The location was really very picturesque. The landscape designer of the vacation base had tried hard. The owners of the site kept and bred their peacock swans. In a separate paddock were horses, which you could pet. Unless, of course, you were afraid they would bite you. For some unknown reason, Adriana said that she would get to her destination on her own. This surprised me a little. However, I did not resist, as she had every right to do as she saw fit. I arrived at the recreation center a little early to ignite the brazier, prepare the meat and shampoo. My companion turned out to be very punctual, was not late for a single minute. The territory was full of vegetation. Therefore, when in the gap I saw the silhouette of Adriana, I stood with bated breath and waited for the children to appear. However, there were none. "Honey, are you so punctual?" "Hello. You know, I expected to see you in slightly different company. Actually, I was expecting to see you in company at all. Where did you put Charles and Betty? Somehow I was sure they'd be with you." "Hello, my good man. To be honest, I thought the children were coming with me too. However, Charles is being picked up by his mom, and Betty threw a tantrum. She said she wanted to go to Grandma's. I didn't try to talk her out of it, because she wouldn't have let us spend the weekend in peace. Of course, I was a little upset. However, now you and I can do whatever we want for 2 days, if you know what I mean." Adriana said the last phrase with a smile that made my heart beat faster. Of course, I would like to spend these 2 days in bed with you. However, if we have a marathon like this, the first day of work will seem like hard labor. I'm sure that after such fitness, there won't be a single muscle left in the body that wouldn't whimper with pain and the slightest strain. At this point, Adriana burst into laughter. I had been allowing myself more and more of these kinds of jokes lately because they amused my woman. To be honest, I also liked them because I could say what I was thinking, immediately translating it into humor. The first day has passed. Ours was simply delightful. The sun was shining, there was a light breeze. We bathed in the river, sunbathed, ate delicious kebab, fresh vegetables. But the way we spent the night, I think, do not need to explain. In the morning, we woke up not from the fact that the pleasant sun rays hit us in the windows, but from the fact that a crazy downpour was drumming on the roof. Outside the window, thunder and lightning was shining. We hoped that such a mind-blowing spectacle would end soon. However, 2 o'clock later, everything was still as it was. We decided that we should leave back to the city, as the access to the recreation center was not paved with asphalt. The road was unpaved, which meant that with each passing hour the chances that we would not be able to leave increased. After quickly packing everything up, we jumped in my car and drove into town. There it was decided that we would stop at Adriana's house. However, just as we started pulling up to her driveway, her phone rang, and after a short conversation, she said that she needed to leave for work for a few hours. I was upset, but I decided that during her absence, I would have time to make dinner and clean up. I drove my lover to her place of work, and I went to her apartment. When I crossed the threshold of her house, I immediately realized that the children were not here. For a long time, the apartment had been cleaned. Everything sparkled with cleanliness, such houses. As a rule, children do not live here. The first thing I did was to take a shower. I was there no more than 20 minutes. When I got out, I noticed someone was in the apartment. I carefully made my way across the room to the kitchen. The refrigerator was open behind a door. I couldn't see who was in there. However, I determined from the lower body that it was a woman. I didn't understand. "Uncle, who are you?" roughly inquired the guest. "You know, madam, I have the same question for you. Who are you? What are you doing here?" "Uncle, hello. This is my house. I don't remember bringing a handsome man like you here. But first of all, my name is David. Secondly, as I recall, this is Adriana's house. Of course, you look a little like her, but you're not Anna. Of course, I'm not Adriana. That woman whose name you mentioned, a lot of people call her my mother, but I wouldn't want her to think of herself as such." Gradually, the woman's tone began to loosen with each second. Her speech became more literate and sweet. She no longer seemed like the rude woman who stuck out from behind a refrigerator and tried to figure out who I was. She was a slender brunette with gorgeous clean hair. I wouldn't say her figure was slender. However, she was very appetizing. I caught myself thinking that I found this woman quite attractive. The fact that she called her mother threw me off. As far as I knew, my lover had only one daughter who had recently turned 4. The woman standing in front of me was at least 20. I could not believe that Adriana had kept from me the fact that she had another daughter. "So I didn't realize who you were. And when will my relative come home?" in a stern voice, the stranger asked. "Adriana and I are dating. She's been called into work for a few hours. I think she should be back by 3. Would you mind telling me your name so I'll at least know how to address you?" "Oh yeah, that's not very nice of me. My name is Kathy. It's very nice to meet you, Kathy. I'm sorry to ask you this, but I'm really curious. Are you really Adriana's daughter?" "David, I see my mother has told me absolutely nothing about me." "Yes, that's so like her. For some reason, she always preferred to conceal my existence to her new acquaintances. Have you ever noticed that Adriana is a rather strange woman? You know, at one time I had a wild desire to show her to some psychiatrist or psychotherapist to assess her real adequacy. In part, I was a little relieved. I could finally get to know my favorite woman's family at least a little bit. Kathy seemed like a very pleasant, special person, despite the harsh language in her vocabulary. When I looked closer, I realized she looked a lot like her mother, practically a copy of her. The only thing missing was the loneliness on some parts of her body. Looking at her, I realized that Adriana had no shortage of admirers when she was young. "What are you doing here?" There was a shout. I turned around and saw my woman. Adriana's eyes were huge with surprise. One could guess that she didn't expect to see her daughter at home at all. "Mommy, hello. It's been a long time. How have I missed you?" Kathy clearly lacked acting talent, as her sarcastic grin made it clear that she was lying. "Stop putting on a show in my house. Why did you come here? Finish your business and get the hell out." "Adriana, why would you do that? I didn't realize you had a grown daughter who looks just like you. It's so beautiful. Let's all have tea together. If you want, I'll go and get Betty and everyone will be together." "David, have you met my daughter yet?" Kathy said with surprise. "Shut your mouth. Shut your fucking mouth. How dare you open it? Who the hell are you? Pack up and get out of here," shouted Adriana. Her scream was so exhausting that it made me feel scared for everyone around me. I thanked God that we didn't have the children with us right now. They wouldn't have been able to bear all that was going on right now. I tried to stay calm. However, one question did not want to leave my mind. What is this? Betty, Kathy's daughter. But then why was Adriana talking about it being her daughter? What the hell is going on here? I can't stand the sound of women screaming since I was young. I'm constantly at a loss, not knowing what to say. While Adriana was screaming at Kathy, I started sobbing. I didn't know who to comfort. I tried to insert my own nonsense, but Adriana just kept screaming. I tried to raise my voice so she could hear me, but all my efforts were in vain. This went on for about 10 minutes until Kathy left the apartment. She was in such a hurry that she didn't bother to educate herself. She picked up her sneakers and ran out. Adriana yelled after her, saying she didn't understand why God had given her such a disgusting daughter. For what sins? At first I rushed towards my beloved, but she pushed me away, shouting. Her claims were unfounded. Adriana claimed I let Kathy into the apartment, but that wasn't true. The girl must have had keys because she was inside. While I was showering, Adriana was angry, not ready to dialogue, and my mind was still reeling with thoughts that Betty was not her daughter. To get some answers, I rushed after Kathy. I realized I probably wouldn't find her because it had been so long. She could have gone anywhere. But I decided to try and catch up with her. Running out of the entrance, I stopped. I had to decide which way Kathy ran. I wasn't the lucky type, so I had no hope at all of catching up with her. If you ran to the right, you could get onto a busy road with public transportation. If you go left, you can go into a quiet, cozy park. Just then, it seemed to me that a park or a public garden would be the perfect place to calm Kathy down, as the girl looked very saddened. It was unlikely that in such a state she would head anywhere on public transportation. The choice was made. I ran to the square. In 5 minutes I was there. There were not many people, as the weather was not very good. It was raining from time to time, but in the distance I could see several female silhouettes sitting on benches. I decided that one of them must definitely be Kathy. So as not to startle anyone, I began to walk down the alley at a measured pace. I was right. Near the beginning of the park, Kathy was sitting on a bench, crying quietly. I stopped a few meters away from her because I was trying to find the right words in my head to help her calm down. But the problem was that I didn't realize what words would have that effect. After all, I didn't know what was going on between her and her mother. And if Adriana didn't say anything about what was going on, then Kathy had to tell me everything. If I decided that I was going to be part of this family, then they should have no secrets from me. Kathy, God, how long have I been looking for you? To be honest, I didn't think I could catch up with you. I inhaled. At that moment, Kathy raised her head. I saw her crying, puffy face, tush smeared across her cheeks. I could see in her eyes that she was surprised to see me here. David, what are you doing here? Were you looking for me on purpose? Why would you want to do that? Kathy bombarded me with questions. Her facial expression radiated disbelief. I would like our relationship to be normal because I have grown to love her mother. Kathy, please don't be hostile to me. Try to understand me. I love your mother, but I had no idea she had such a grown-up daughter. I thought Betty was her child. Your screaming knocked me out of reality. If I'm going to have any chance of getting on with my life, I need to find out the truth. Please, please help me figure it out. Tell me everything I need to know. Kathy looked up at me, wiped her eyes with her hands, tears welling up and partying. She was confused, probably didn't know where to start. The truth she told me about her mother hit me like a shoe on the head. I think the girl understood my condition, so she kept silent for a long time to find the right words. David, the only thing I can tell you is that you must get away from your mother. You have no idea what kind of person she is, what she's capable of. You don't know our history. Then I'll tell you. You may not realize it, but I'm only 20 years old. Betty is actually my daughter. A person who knows the elementary rules of math later guessed that when I gave birth to her, I was only 15 years old. I got pregnant, immediately ran to tell my mom about it. I knew it wasn't meant to be, but it just happened. There was nowhere to go. Adriana yelled at me. so the neighbors probably heard it. At first, she forced me to have an abortion. I wouldn't go along with it. We fought for days. But at some point, Adriana said she agreed with my opinion, and I would give birth. I was very happy about this turn of events, as I did not expect my mom to give up so quickly. A week later, we went to the doctor. He told me that I had some malfunctions in my body that needed to be eliminated and prescribed me a medicine. When we got home, my mom said that I would not take these pills. Replace them with herbs. I had nothing against it, as folk medicine and people use for many years. For 2 days, I drank these decoctions. My condition only worsened. One day, I went to visit one of the relatives on my father's line, told her about my well-being and the fact that I was drinking the decoction. When the relative found out what herbs my mother was talking to me about, she started screaming and demanded that I never drink them again in my life. As it turned out, my mother was trying to induce premature labor in me. You see, David and she didn't care about my baby, and she didn't care about me either. From that day on, I never came home again. She tried to look for me, but my aunt carefully helped to hide me. When the day of delivery came, I was taken to the hospital. Here, of course, we made a mistake. This is the only place where we give birth. Naturally, my mom was already there waiting for me. Or rather, she paid the doctors to notify her. I was admitted to the labor and delivery ward. It was a difficult labor. To be honest, I don't remember much. When I woke up, I was told that my baby had died harder, and the pain I had probably never experienced in my life. I didn't know where to go. I decided I would go to my mother. After I was discharged, I went home, but no one was waiting for me there. My mom had changed all the locks on the door. She opened the door a little and told me to get out. I, on the other hand, had been persistent in my day, and so I didn't give up and try to beg off. I could see that Mom was nervous. After a while, I heard a child screaming in our apartment. When I tried to ask who was crying, my mom just pushed me away. I flew into the wall, and she shut the door. To say I was stunned is like saying nothing. I had no idea that Adriana would turn out to be such a cruel woman who was willing to kill her granddaughter and hurt her daughter. As it turned out, the horror was yet to come. Kathy continued to narrate. I think my eyes grew wider and wider with each word she spoke. As it turned out, Adriana had bribed the doctors at the maternity hospital to tell them that her daughter Kathy had been admitted. And so they did. While the girl was in the throes of labor and her mother was already in the hospital, discussing with the doctors the scam they had pulled in the end. When Kathy woke up, she was told that the baby had been stillborn. In fact, the staff had forged documents in which the girl supposedly gave up her daughter. Apparently, the guardianship and custody authorities were also involved, as the girl was easily given to her birth grandmother, who eventually became her mother according to the documents. I just could not understand what motivated Adriana to such a disgusting act. At first, it even appeared that she initially wanted to kill this child, and then she took it away from her own daughter. I couldn't believe that I had fallen in love with such a disgusting person. After all, Adriana seemed to me to always be empathetic and merciful. At some point, I felt completely all the pain Kathy was feeling at the moment. I came to the girl, embraced her. She reciprocated. Immediately, she buried her nose in my chest and started sobbing again. I'll repeat it forever. There is nothing more horrible in the world than the tears of a woman. When Kathy calmed down, we talked some more time. I needed to get to know this person as well as possible to understand how to help her. All the while my phone was ringing off the hook with Adriana's calls. I didn't want to talk to her at the time, so I didn't pick up the phone. It turned out that Kathy had just started a business a year ago. She was helping women become more beautiful. In a small amount of time, she had built up a steady base of clients who signed up a month in advance to see her for manicures, pedicures, and eyelash extensions. Not so long ago, she did all these procedures alone. But now she has a small premises with offices where specialists of the highest qualification work. I began to ask Kathy if she had tried to get her daughter back. The girl told me that for the first year and a half she had been beating on all doors, telling me that she had been deceived, that she had not given up her child. However, no one believed her. The police did not want to deal with the case as they considered it unimportant. The Child Welfare Authority simply closed their doors in her face because her mother had paid them generously. I realized that I could probably help legally get Kathy her daughter Betty back. However, I began to think through all of my options. The fact of the matter is that I believe that Adriana unjustifiably deprived her daughter of her child. In fact, Kathy has done nothing wrong other than getting pregnant at 15. Kathy, please calm down. I believe you have been treated unfairly, to say the least, and I promise I'll help you if things work out. You'll be embracing your own daughter tonight. David, but how are you going to do that? It's impossible. She'll never let me see her in my life. You realize I only saw my daughter when I was peeping at them. I couldn't get any closer and I watched all the time at a distance of 5-7 meters. If Adriana noticed me, she would immediately grab Betty and run away. One day I tried to go up after her, but she started screaming, calling the police. People around me started looking at me, grabbing their kids. For some reason, everyone thought I was trying to steal the baby. I just wanted to be with my daughter, who was mine, not this grown woman who was called my mother. At that moment, Adriana called again. Like last time, I had no intention of picking up the phone. However, I realized that this was the only opportunity to return the child to his real mothers. When I answered the phone, Adriana bombarded me with hundreds of questions. Mostly she wanted to know why I ran away. What am I doing now? Why didn't I pick up the phone? I tried to explain that everything that was happening had stirred up a storm of emotions in me that I couldn't control. In addition, I decided that she needed to feel guilty. So I mentioned that I was offended by her rash actions and secrecy. Adriana began to tell me that it was all a very complicated story. She was ashamed to admit everything. After that, the woman began to tell her version of events. Her story was that Kathy robbed a store when she was 15 and got pregnant by some criminal mastermind. She knew nothing about her pregnancy at all. She was confronted just a week before she gave birth. The whole time the investigation was going on. When Kathy gave birth, she was sentenced to 5 years. Because of that, the girl had to give up the baby, and Adriana decided to take on the burden. So what you're saying is that Kathy spent those 4 years in prison. Am I understanding this correctly? I asked her mother that question in front of Kathy. Yeah, that's nice. And that's just the way it was. In all those years, she never once thought of her daughter. How could I trust her? This little miracle. I mean, she's gonna go back downhill. Nobody goes back to normal after prison. I saw real rage on Kathy's face. She was ready to explode. I tried with all my might to show her to keep quiet. The belt couldn't be aware of the fact that it was just the two of us now. If the girl made a single sound that Adriana's ears would pick up, my plan would fail. The girl was holding on from the last of her strength. Adriana tried to make peace with me. I told her that I could only meet her if she took Betty with her. She agreed. She said that as soon as she picked up the girl from the babysitter, she would call me right back. Right after that, I started telling Kathy about the plan that had been stuck in my head. I assured her that if everything went smoothly, she would have a daughter sitting in her arms in just a few hours. The girl had nowhere to go, so she agreed with everything I told her. Half an hour later, I received a call from Adriana saying that she had picked up Betty and was now ready to meet me. I set up a meeting at the park. I was now with Kathy. For about 20 minutes, the girl and I discussed where she would be. I gave her the keys to my car, which I had moved closer to the park entrance. When Adriana called, I left Kathy and went to meet my favorite girls. Adriana had a frustrated look on her face. However, the cheerful and upbeat Betty lifted my spirits a little. The girl was happily running towards me. I was surprised by this as she had only seen me once in her life. However, according to Adriana, the little girl kept asking about me. Of course, I was very flattered by this. As soon as Adriana came closer to me, She immediately started making excuses and telling again her whole story, which of course I did not believe. I tried to make it look like I believed every word she said and asked questions. What surprised me the most was the fact that Betty knew that Adriana was not her real mother. She knew there was some Kathy girl who had given birth to her, abandoned her, then moved far away. I can probably understand why Adriana told her everything about the baby girl, because as she gets older, she will start to realize that Adriana is old enough to be her mother. About 15 minutes later, Adriana's car key fob started beeping. The sound of an alarm was heard from afar. The woman was very frightened that someone might have hit her because she had parked in the wrong place. That was a good thing for me. To be honest, I thought we'd have a longer chat with her. However, Kathy didn't hesitate and went straight to the other entrance where her mother's car was parked to make her yell. I told Adriana that I had no problem staying with Betty for a while the woman went to the car and made sure she was okay. She thanked me and immediately darted off in the direction of the unauthorized parking lot. As soon as Adriana was out of sight, I picked Betty up in my arms and ran the other way. All along the road, I prayed to God that Kathy would make it back to my car in that short time. Surprisingly, the little girl wasn't scared. She took it all as a game, and I tried to joke with her along the way so as not to make people suspicious. Out of the park, Kathy showed up from around the corner, unlocking my car as she walked. I opened the back door, put Betty in it, and jumped behind the wheel myself. Kathy ran over and got in the back seat too and gave me the keys. I started the car and we drove off to wherever the hell we were going. I didn't really know where we were going because now I'm a real criminal, but I'm only a criminal under the law. What was more important to me was the reunion between mother and daughter. All along the way, Kathy hugged Betty and sobbed so bitterly. It was as if what had happened to her 4 years ago had just recently happened to her. 10 minutes later, my phone started ringing off the hook with Adriana's calls. I didn't pick up the phone because I just didn't know what to say to her. I was bitter because I had loved her with all my heart, and she wasn't the person she claimed to be. When Kathy calmed down a little, she began to thank me. The words of her gratitude felt warm in my heart. At that moment, I thought that something could have worked out between us. After a little chatting with the girl, I decided that we would all go into hiding together. I decided that we need to go to my grandmother's house, which was located in 1,500 kilometers from my home. I inherited it, but I had never been there. All along the road, I sincerely hoped that the house was in good condition. It was in a remote village with only about 20 houses, but that didn't scare me. The main thing was that there would be internet, and I would be able to work remotely. Perhaps Adriana will have a conscience, and she will not go to the police and guardianship authorities. If she does, and we are found, then I will spend all my savings on the best lawyer I can find to help sort out this convoluted story. In the meantime, I will just hope that I have a happy and carefree life ahead of me, and Kathy and her beautiful daughter will be part of my family. I don't understand what the problem is. If I am 43 years old and I have never been married, and I have no children, for some reason, my relatives don't like this situation at all. Their only desire in this life is to help me start a family. But how can they not realize that help is needed only when they ask for it? I have never regretted being single for a second. Not having children is such a gift from God. In fact, it's entirely my fault. I've always been careful. Protection above all else. Otherwise, at some point in your life, your potential children will come to you from all over the country, even from places you've never been. The mother, of course, is the one who worries the most. Even when my father was alive, she constantly tried to organize meetings with potential candidates for the role of my wife. All this looked as if quite by chance, the daughter of my mother's friend or colleague, or one of her students came to visit us. The options for calling these damsels names were countless. When her father passed away, she became more obsessive. In addition to constantly arranging so-called chance encounters, this is how she began to constantly drip on my brain. After I celebrated my 40th birthday, it was like she went crazy. It got to the point where I couldn't live with her. Basically, I was never ashamed of living with my parents. I was fine with it. I only came to this house to sleep over or have dinner. I work all the time. Even on weekends, I wanted to always get a big paycheck to constantly develop in this field. I did get more and more money every month, but still it was not enough for me. Why should I give up money if all I need to do is to spend a little more time in the office? I did not aspire to be a supervisor. Unlike a supervisor, my earnings depended only on myself, and he had a fixed salary periodically. My salary was more than his by a factor of 1.5 to 2 times. So, what's wrong with an ordinary working man? Apart from that, there were other pluses in the fact that I was an ordinary staff worker, while on the colleagues occupying managerial positions, girls hung like on a hanger of the theater outerwear. There wasn't as much attention directed at me. I was fine with that. I was not at all turned on by the fact that the girls saw me as a huge wallet. I liked to choose a girl myself and pursue her. I don't know how to woo. I used all the conventional ways. Of course, all these years I really tried to find my soulmate. But my longest relationships have lasted no more than 5 months. The last relationship sucked all the energy out of me. I was exhausted both physically and mentally. Her name was Kathy. She was 20 years younger than me. I thought it was kind of cool at first. She had an energy inside her that spread to those around her. For some reason, at the bar, she had her eye on me. I tried my best to ignore her. I didn't want to get involved with underage girls. But then she managed to get me talking. Kathy turned out to be a nice person to talk to, and the time flew by. That's how we talked. And in the morning, I woke up in my bed with this girl lying on my chest. Her beautiful, long, curly, red hair was lying on the pillow, and part of it covered her bare breasts. I'll be honest, she looked stunning in the morning sunlight. I was so engrossed that at times I forgot to breathe so as not to wake her up. From that day on, our so-called love began. That girl did unimaginable things to me, manipulated me any way she wanted. I fell for it. I did everything she wanted. I bought her a car after a month. Yes, not a new one, but still, jewelry, a fur coat, even though it was summer. Travel. I gave her everything. And what I got in return? What did I get in return? Sex. And that's about it. She didn't cook, she didn't clean. She partied all the time. It's getting a little hard for me to live at her pace. I wouldn't mind her partying all the time, as long as she was happy. But every time she didn't get enough. I didn't understand what I needed to do to make her calm down, settle down. I even asked her, but she only put forward conditions under which she was willing to bring peace to my world. But she never kept her promises. Every time she returned home, all intoxicated and intoxicated. Sometimes I thought it wasn't just the alcohol. But personally, I did not force her for this action and did not find anything suspicious at home. It was over in a flash. Somehow I wanted to please her, to arrange a romantic evening. So I did not, as usual, delayed at work. I went home right after the end of the day. On the way, I stopped by the store to buy a bunch of flowers. I knew she was home because just before I got there, she had called me and complained that her friends had canceled a meeting, and she didn't know what to do that evening. I got home, walked into the hallway, and immediately ran through the apartment without noticing anything around the dining room was gone. Her in the living room went to the bedroom too. Well, you guessed what I saw there. As in the most bearded anecdotes, my beautiful, young, red-haired beauty was swallowed by some young man with milk on his lips. Not absolutely. Oh yeah. For all that, they were both naked and I stayed to watch it. They didn't notice me until about 7 minutes later. That's when I turned around and went into the living room. A couple minutes later, they both ran out of the bedroom. The guy headed straight for the exit, and Kathy headed for me. Why are you looking at me like it's my fault? I mean, it's not a big deal. David, I agree that it's an unpleasant situation, but let's be honest, it's entirely your fault. What are you out of your mind? How am I so guilty that you decided to ride another man? David, well, That's a lot of heat. It's very simple. You're a grown man and you should know where your behavior is leading. You chose me, knowing I'm half your age. You get caught up in work all the time. And I have certain needs. Henceforth, so that this doesn't happen again, pay more attention to me. Kathy, do you even see what you're saying? I'm always stuck at work because your appetites are growing by the day. And please tell me, when have I ever dared to deny myself your carnal needs? Well, it's never happened. I'm sure you'd deny me. Are you trying to make me complex? It's just that sometimes I have wild urges that need to be curbed, but you're not around. So sometimes I have to look for other options. I have to look. So it wasn't the only time. And you're so calm about it. No, it wasn't. Are you not hearing me at all? Well, reevaluate your life, and then we'll be fine. To say I was shocked is like saying nothing. I've never encountered such insolence. I'll be honest, I believed for a split second that I really was at fault for what had happened. I had to pull myself together, so I slapped my cheeks a couple times, and that helped. And then I got up, went into the hallway, grabbed Kathy's bag, then headed into the kitchen. The girl was drinking tea and looking out the window. I walked over to her, picked her up in my arms. Kathy thought I had admitted guilt and had come to make up. However, that was not the case. I went to the hallway and opened the front door. Kathy began to suspect something, so she started to pull away. But my grip was ironclad. I set her barefoot on the cold tile. Paul threw the bag on the floor and closed the door. Kathy still tried to bang on the door for a while and screamed all over the floor. But as soon as I threatened her with the police, she left. The girl was not happy that all her things were left at home, but I didn't care what she was wearing. Let her be happy that I left the car to her and go to the damn grandmother. After a while, I learned from acquaintances that Kathy knew from the beginning how much money I was making. That's why he was grooming me so much at the bar during our first meeting. At that moment, everything fell into place, and I was a fool to fall for her. It was probably just passion, though. If I had really fallen for her, I wouldn't have gotten rid of her so easily. Anyway, from that moment on, I wasn't interested in relationships anymore. All 3 years, I just chose women for fun even, and did not hide my income. Then things got easier. I just picked one day a week, went to a bar, and got what I wanted. If it was a busy week, I'd go to the bar 2 or 3 times. Mom saw my behavior change. She was always finding reasons for me to come to her when I met her, playing the same old songs. To be honest, I just let everything she said pass me by. After a while, I realized I couldn't let it go. Something must be done to calm my mother down. If she calmed down, my life would be at peace. I could think of nothing better to do than to find a fake bride. I had to choose a middle-aged woman because my mother would not fall for a young girl and continued to brainwash me. There were no single adult women in my neighborhood. I decided to look in the park. There was no time to wait, and it was Saturday. It was getting close to sundown, so there were a lot of people there. Probably a lot of visitors thought I was a maniac because I glare at every woman who even remotely fit my criteria. When I realized that I was frankly sad, I put on my glasses. I didn't want to end up for such a misunderstanding. And in the monkey house, they'd put a couple of cases on me. After 40 minutes, I found a woman who matched my requirements perfectly. I could tell she was a homemaker, but she wasn't a gray mouse. She looked delicious. A lot of young girls wouldn't have been on a par with her. Next to the woman was a boy of about 15 and a girl who was no more than 4 years old. I watched this family for about 30 minutes, and that's because I couldn't see. Is there a wedding ring on the ring finger of my potential bride's right hand? I tried to look from all angles, but nothing worked. Then I decided that I would sort of accidentally bump into her, and if there was no ring, I would meet her right away. I walked towards her and pushed her with my shoulder. Apparently, I didn't calculate my strength because the lady fell on the lawn. I didn't see that coming, and I was stunned. "Where are you going?" The guy brought me out of my trance. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I really didn't see you. You're all right. I rushed over to the woman to help her up. I was really afraid I'd hurt her. Yes, thank you. I'm fine. Don't worry. I'm sure you didn't do it on purpose. God, how wrong was she? My face was getting angry paint. Charles, don't be so rude. Not all people do harm on purpose. For God's sake, forgive my nephew. He's always protecting me since my husband left me. My gaze slid down her arm. There really was no ring. That's good news. What's even better news is that, pray tell, it's only her nephew. That fact made it much easier, because young boys are very wary of a potential stepfather, albeit a fictitious one. And I understand this is your young protector. You can tell he's ready to snatch me up with just a look. Charles, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your aunt. Or maybe you did, but on the bed. She's a very pretty mademoiselle. I'd like to rectify the situation. How is that possible? Well, for starters, I can take you to the infirmary so we can all make sure you're all right. You what? Take it easy. But I've been rolling around in the grass a little bit. There's Betty already rolling around in the park every day. The woman pointed to the girl who was lying on the lawn with her own grass. Well, then maybe we can get acquainted, and I'll buy you dinner, all of you. I stand corrected. We can get acquainted. I have to know the name of the person I'm supposed to avoid, in order not to end up on the grass again, the woman said with a smile. My name is Adriana. You have a very beautiful name, Adriana, said I in a languid voice, extending my hand. And I am David. Our names sound similar. Maybe it's not a coincidence that we met. Well, I don't know. It wasn't what you'd call a pleasant encounter. She seemed more confident than I first thought. So how about dinner? My treat. Everybody dance, as they say. That's when the kid's eyes lit up. Apparently, his parents and Adriana didn't spoil him with much in the way of goodies. All right, but we'll have dinner without the kids. But the aunt pulled Charles' no aunts. Take Betty's hand and go home. There's everything in the refrigerator so you can satisfy your hunger. The adults need to talk. 3. What's that for? Let me drive them home. Why walk? And you won't have to worry. I'm not gonna worry about it. We live a block away from this park. The boys won't even have to cross a busy road. At that moment, Charles took her hand, showed us his tongue, and the girl repeated after him. The sight was very cute. A genuine smile stretched across my face. The guys headed towards the exit of the park. I hesitated a bit as I didn't know what to do with Adriana, whether to give her a hand or not. I mean, she had just fallen. Maybe she really needed my help. There were already a few sparks running between us, though, so the gesture could be interpreted differently. And I wouldn't want that, because the woman I was looking for was fictitious. She had a role to play. I wasn't interested in anything else. Adriana. The first one headed toward the exit, and I, not knowing what to do, put my hands behind my back. I probably looked like a prisoner, but I didn't care. The important thing was not to ruin something that wasn't even there yet. I walked the woman to my car, opened the door for her like a true gentleman. I got behind the wheel, and we drove off. At that moment, I had no idea where we were going. I had to pick a mid-range establishment, so to speak, so she wouldn't think I was courting her. On the way to another neighborhood, I saw a small restaurant and stopped outside of it. The hostess took us to a table on the veranda. The place was delightful, and so was the view. It was already sunset, and the sky was going from bright blue to deep purple, and in the middle was a streak of red. Adriana looked ravishing. For her age, I was sure she'd order some standard Kaiser. We'll talk. However, the woman surprised me. She ordered lamb kebab and young potatoes. I don't know what was on my face, but when she looked up at me, she said, "You probably know what it's like to spend all day with kids and feet." "I'm lying around and hungry as a dog," said the woman and burst into loud laughter. Unfortunately, I can't imagine what you are experiencing. I don't know how you perceive my facial expression, but I was just surprised that a woman with such a beautiful figure eats potatoes with mutton. Oh, I was shy. So don't be shy. Order whatever you want, I said with a smile. No, let's stop here, or I'll change now, and then I'll want to sleep. I won't care what you talk to me about. I will demand that you take me home. What do you say? Tell me about your children. I understand Charles is your nephew. And Betty. Who's Betty? Daughter? You could say that, but more specifically, if you don't mind. A daughter. A daughter who decided to have a baby as an adult. You are tactfully silent, but I can see that you want to ask me what. How old am I? You don't have to deny it. I can see it in your eyes. Of course, it's indecent for a woman to ask such a question. But I'm not the hidden type. I'm 40 years old and you're 43. Wow. How did you know that? It didn't even take you long to figure it out. I've known you for as long as I've known you. I've been intuitive since I was a child. My father trusted me to pick lottery tickets when I was very young. And guess what? We hit the jackpot. So keep in mind, I can be very useful to you. Adriana had a wide smile on her face, which mesmerized my gaze. Shall we switch to you? I suggested, for I was tired of this officiousness. Let's do it. I began to ask Adriana about her life. I needed to find the perfect woman for the role of a bride, albeit a fictitious one. My mother was a smart, wise woman. She was determined to every little detail. So everything had to be perfect, impossible to tamper with. It turned out that Adriana owned one of the drugstore chains in our town. That was a good thing. The woman had everything she needed, which meant she had no claim on my money. Adriana would have wanted to step away from her business a long time ago and turn the chain of pharmacies over to someone else, but she couldn't trust anyone. The woman said she would run the outlets as long as she could. Then she would simply sell the business. Adriana was a very pleasant person to talk to. To be honest, I didn't want to ruin the evening with my proposal. Adriana was worth more than that. And I was almost certain that my proposal would offend the woman. But it was worth a try, as they say. Adriana, I have a confession to make. I only ask one thing. You listen to me all the way through before you jump to conclusions. Sounds interesting. Well, let's give it a try. I'm listening. I took in a full chest of air. My heart began to pound harder, echoing in my ears. It was no longer acceptable to back up. Adriana, I didn't crash into you by accident, but I didn't mean for it to turn out this way. When I saw you on the lawn, I freaked out and cursed myself with all the right words in the world. I meant to hit you gently with my shoulder, but I didn't realize the force. So I'm prepared to apologize to you for the rest of my life. I'm so ashamed. Shut up, please, I said between words as I saw Adriana open her mouth to say something. I'll go on. Why did I do it? That's the question you're asking. I wanted to meet you, but I didn't see you. Is there a wedding ring on your finger? I thought I'd check it that way. Again, I'm sorry, please. After that, I got to the point. I told the woman about how my mother cares for me despite my advanced age. Of course, I was afraid to seem like a mama's boy in her eyes. However, I could not pass this part of the story about myself. Then I smoothly came to the fact that my mother's cherished dream is that I have a family. Adriana, please, there's not much left. You see, her obsession had become so unbearable that I was almost desperate, so I decided on one strange act. Introduce my mother to a fictitious bride. The woman interrupted me. I was blown away by her insight. No, you had to. I was trying to make it sound veiled. Did I just blurt it out to her? I'm not gonna ask you how you figured it out, but yes, you're right. I thought it was a fake relationship. Please note, not a marriage, but a relationship. It's the best way out of this situation. Well, you know, my mother's not gonna be fooled. She can detect deception. I didn't want some girl who'd do anything for money. I wanted an older woman. You mean old? No? Adriana, no. You can't find a smart woman these days. That's why I looked and looked, and I chose you. Jesus, you've been following me around in a frightened tone of voice, she said. Not just today. I've been watching you for half an hour. Anyway, I've decided you'd be perfect for the role. I'm willing to offer you anything. Please help me. Sounds very strange, to be honest, but I've always been very adventurous. So I guess I'll take it. But I have one condition. I agree to all say that I have not fallen in love with me, that you have not fallen in love with me. I speak Russian, yes. I ended up laughing. It's been a long time since anyone made me laugh like that. I mean, come on. Was she really so sure of herself that she would assume I was falling in love with her? She's an attractive woman, no doubt. But you don't fall in love with someone like her when you're older. They choose them for a home that's cozy and clean and smells of borscht and hockey sticks. I promise, Adriana, that I do not fall in love with you, I said with a slight smile. After that, we were clear on the goals we had to reach. It took us at least an hour and a half to come up with a plan of action. During this time, we drank 2 cups of coffee, and it got dark outside. Not a single star was visible in the sky. It was covered with clouds and a light breeze came up. But it was cold, so I took off my jacket and threw it over Adriana's shoulders. I'm a gentleman. What a nobody. There was no time to delay. So we scheduled the meeting with my mother for tomorrow. Despite the fact that Adriana was an elegant woman, I asked her to observe some dress code. No cleavage, no skirts above the knees, no loose hair. My mother considered all women who didn't adhere to these criteria very frivolous. And what man would want his fiancée to be considered as such, even if it was fictitious? After the discussion, we went home. I drove Adriana home. She actually lived in the heart of the city in a swanky new housing complex. I even managed to get a good look at her windows because Charles was standing in one of them, and 4-year-old Betty's head was sticking out of the other. They were waiting for a woman not 1 o'clock. At this point, I even felt ashamed. It was because of me. They'd spent so much time alone. I hoped they weren't hungry. If they'd come to dinner with us then, I probably wouldn't have told Adriana everything. And the kids don't need to hear that. Adriana left, and I headed home. That night must have been endless. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't get the thought out of my head that our plan was going to fail. And then I remembered the woman's words when she asked me not to fall in love with her. A smile spread across my face. It felt so warm. But I didn't understand why this was happening, and shook my head sharply, as if to empty it. I must have fallen asleep in the morning. So when the alarm clock rang, I didn't even realize where I was. Like a robot, I got up, washed my face, and went to work. I stopped at a coffee shop on the way and got a double espresso. I needed a dose of pep. I took 3 sips. I was going to repeat the purchase, but I thought the effect would come a little later. And I was right. For the first hour at work, I just sat there staring at the wall. How could I write program code if I forgot even my name from excitement? Not to mention the name of my so-called fiancé. When the vigor began to appear in me, I immediately got to work. The cat was pissing himself. My fingers couldn't keep up with my thoughts. I was sure that at the end of the working day I would discover mistakes. But I was wrong. The program worked the first time. It helped to cheer me up even more. I urgently needed to come to my senses because the meeting with my mother was getting closer. Right after the end of the workday, I went home, showered, shaved, and styled my hair. Everything has to be at a high level. Otherwise, my mother wouldn't believe the scam. After I realized I looked amazing, I went to pick up Adriana. As I drove up, I noticed she was already waiting for me at the entrance. She looked amazing. She was wearing a classic black background dress that developed easily in the wind, a 3/4 arm on her feet, classic boat shoes, and in her hands a wisp of delicate purple that matched her belt perfectly. This woman certainly had taste. As Adriana got into the car, I could smell the scent of her perfume. It was different from the one she had been wearing yesterday. The day before, she smelled of the sea and freshness. Today, it was a pleasant floral scent with a slight sweetness. "Hi." I held out my hand, hoping she would put her graceful hand in it. "You look stunning." "Hello, David. Really, all your wishes are taken care of?" she asked. A slight smile appeared on her face. I was staring so hard that I didn't even realize we were already holding hands. "You're more than ready. Let's go." Adriana bowed and waved as if the coachman was sitting in front of us. I didn't hesitate. I started the car, pressed the gas pedal, and drove toward my mother's house. Adriana and I had a pleasant conversation on the way. She was talking about how Charles and Betty had greeted her warmly yesterday. The boys had missed their aunt and Mom so much that they had decided to make her dinner. True, it was very different. They served her a salad of red fish apples, crab sticks, and mayonnaise. Adriana recounted that she tried her best to pretend that it was the most exquisite dish she had ever tasted in her life. She prayed to God that the kids would get away from her as soon as possible so she could stop eating that salad. She told it so emotionally that I couldn't keep from laughing. Tears came to my eyes, which made me unable to see the road well. The woman made me laugh so hard that I had to park in the first place I could find. When we pulled up to my mother's house, my heart sank. I knew it was all fictitious, but I was worried as if Adriana was really my fiancée. The woman gently took my hand and told me not to worry. She promised that everything would go off to the best of her ability. I believed her because she was a wise and responsible woman. I think that if she could not fulfill my request, she would have given up on the scam right away. She was not the kind of person who could and liked to lose. More accurately, no one likes to lose. However, some people aren't even upset by it. They take it for granted. We got out of the car, and from that moment on, we looked like a couple in love. After all, my mother could stand at the window and watch us. Adriana took me under her arm, and like a gallant cavalier, I led her to the entrance, opened the door, and held her close. When we took the elevator to the floor we needed, we found that the door to the apartment was already open, and half of my mother's face was peering out of it. She was too curious. "But couldn't you just wait in the apartment? That's where we're going anyway." "Hello, my son, my good son." God, I couldn't believe it. That you would come to me today, and not alone at the expense of Metal Mother. "Hello, Mom. What did you think I was doing, lying to you? Meet my girlfriend, Adriana." Adriana walked up to her mother and extended her hand. Mom responded to her welcoming gesture. "Adriana, I'm so glad my dummy has you. But don't get too excited. It's just that we haven't met at all yet. It's nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you. Of course, of course. Let's get acquainted. Why are you standing in the hallway? Come into the hall. David, help your bride." "Mom, we're going out." "Well, it's not hard for a girl to grow up to be a bride. I'm sure you won't drag this out too long. I'm not young at all. And I'd like to babysit grandchildren very much." Adriana's mom turned around and gave me her beautiful smile. It was obvious that the woman was feeling a little awkward. I can't imagine how much the discomfort level would have increased if we were actually dating. Mom was pushing us when we were still in the hallway. What would happen when we made our way into the living room? I had no idea at the time. A sumptuous table was set in the hall. The food was as good as a restaurant's in appearance. Even for a second, I thought that my mom had hired a chef to prepare all these delicious dishes. Of course, that wasn't actually true. My mom had a lifelong love of cooking, and she did it deliciously. Her dishes were not only delicious, but beautiful as well. Over the years, she had honed her skills. We sat down at the table, so there was no doubt in my mother's mind that we were dating. We sat very close to each other, so our hands and feet were touching. At this point, I noticed that my body was responding to this kind of contact. I had to remember the not-so-great moments of my life, so as not to embarrass myself. But I thought Adriana had noticed something, because she looked at me with a sly look and a smile that said, "Yeah, so maybe we'll have a real relationship, I can see that." It made me very uncomfortable. "Adriana, well, tell me what you do in life." The woman happily began to tell me about herself. I started to worry that she wouldn't say too much because she was very enthusiastic. My mom listened with interest. I could see from her face that she was pleased that Adriana had her own chain of pharmacies. She even joked that she now knew where to go with the list of medicines that the doctor would make at the appointment, because the treatment was very expensive. At first I wanted to ask her why she was going to be treated, but then I bit my tongue, because at her age all the sores come out. Adriana, how old are you? Mom, isn't it unseemly for you to be so hard on her? But I have to know if your woman can give birth to you or not. I can see she's not a girl anymore. After saying that, I was speechless. That's when my mother became so tactless. How could she even say such a thing? Looking at her face, I realized that she didn't regret the question she asked. The silence was awkward and dragged on. Adriana realized she had to do something. Honey, it's okay. Don't worry. I'm 40 years old, she said with a soft smile. 40, her mother said thoughtfully. That's menopause. It is not a fact that you will be able to get pregnant. Mom, come on, Mom, who's going to take care of you if not me? Maybe she'll leave you when she realizes she can't give birth to you. Mom, God, honey, calm down. You know that in today's world, medicine doesn't stand still. If you can't get pregnant naturally, you can use IVF. It's such a small thing. I marveled at how my fictitious fiancée kept her composure, and the insults flying at her weren't fictitious at all. What normal person wouldn't take offense at something my mother said, no matter who that person was? He would feel insulted. But IVF is nice, but it doesn't feel real. Don't worry, I've got kids. They can help relieve your loneliness if you need it. God, why did she have to say that? This is a real failure, I thought, and I was right. I can see why you're not so worried about getting pregnant. It's just that you already have kids and don't need any more. Mom, please, let's just drop the subject. We did close the subject. I realized that I had a conversation with my mother ahead of me. I was sure she'd be crazy about Adriana. But from the very doorstep, she wasn't satisfied with her age. The interesting thing is that she wouldn't be satisfied with the age of the bride. In any case, she would arise that she was too young and would leave me, and the other one was old and would not bear me children with my mother. There was no golden mean. The rest of the time we talked about distracted topics. Mom was already unwilling to continue the event, and Adriana masterfully built herself a fool who supposedly does not understand anything. That's commendable. After all, one should treat one's mother-in-law with leniency, even if it is a fictitious one. I'm sure that this behavior of my companion, Mom, was even angrier. She liked it when people reacted painfully to her words. Mom thought she was always telling the truth. I thought she was just being rude. I didn't have the energy to continue the evening. So Adriana and I cited fatigue and left Mother's house. At the threshold, my mother reached out to kiss me goodbye and whispered in my ear, "See your lady off and come back to me to talk." Shit, that's what I was most afraid of. But I didn't let on. Adriana took my hand, and we headed for the elevator. We didn't say anything until we were out of the elevator and in the car. And Adriana, please forgive her. I'm just shocked. I had no idea she'd act like this. She's always been like this, but not on the day she met her future daughter-in-law. How could she even say that? You're at a normal age. Do you hear me, normal? I started yelling as I drove to her house. David, stop it. She's right here. As a mother, I wouldn't be happy with your choices either. You're a young man. You need children. And a woman like me would not be able to give birth to you, or I'd be afraid to. At that age, there can be complications not only for the baby, but for the mother as well. Stop talking nonsense. I was losing my temper. By then I was pulling into Adriana's driveway. I said, "You're a normal age. I don't think it's as bad as my mother says," I blurted out as I pulled the car over. Prove that you don't think so." With a charming smile, said Adriana, I was confused. I didn't understand what she was expecting from me. My body reacted strangely to her words with some unknown impulse. I threw myself on top of her and kissed her. Her lips were very soft, and I felt an electric shock run through my body. It was a long-forgotten feeling. For several years, no woman had stirred in me such desire as she did today. My hands disobeyed my brain and continued to explore her body. It was beautiful, despite her age. Adriana, on the other hand, also had a genuine desire. It was evident in her demeanor. Her breasts rose higher and higher as her breathing became heavier and heavier. I was somewhat surprised at this turn of events, as I thought that my fictitious bride was responsible for the task I had set for her, namely creating the illusion of an ideal couple, nothing more. But I could tell from her that she had wanted me for a long time, and that fact was a pretty big boost to my self-esteem back then. And not just hers. I don't even remember how we ended up in Adriana's apartment, because I don't think we stopped kissing at all. Her lips were so soft, so passionate. I was starting to taste blood after a lot of kissing. Apparently, Adriana hadn't practiced such long kisses in a long time. Opening the front door, we piled into the apartment. After that, it was like we were blown away. I started tearing off her clothes like a beast and completely stopped thinking about the fact that there might be children in the house. Adriana, as if she sensed that I had that question inside of me. "It's okay, they're gone," the woman said with a huff. "They are at their grandmother's house, don't worry." After that, I realized that I was allowed to do everything that I had previously been afraid to even imagine. The rest of the time, we did not get out of bed. I'll leave out all the details, but I will only say that in the morning I felt as if I had been run over by a roller. All my muscles and joints ached, as if I had not made love. Yesterday I worked out and left world records in weightlifting. When I woke up, Adriana was still in bed and singing sweetly. At some point I realized I couldn't stop looking at her. At that moment she seemed to me the most beautiful creature on this planet. I couldn't understand what this woman had done to me. After all, until a few days ago, I was not interested in anything but my work. Adriana was good too. It turns out she had deceived me. I mean, we agreed beforehand that our relationship would be a sham, and today I'm in bed with her after a hot night I'll probably never forget. I wonder how Adriana will feel when she wakes up. Maybe she'll be ashamed, or maybe she'll want a sequel. Maybe after this, she'll think I'll marry her. What if I do marry her? I don't reject that possibility at all. I had once thought that this woman would only help me to put my mother's guard down. I didn't think she'd make me go crazy. When Adriana opened her eyes, I pretended like a boy to be asleep. My eyes were slightly open, so I saw everything through my lashes. She lost her eyes with her beautiful hands. After that, she looked at me as if I was the love of her life. Maybe that's how it really was. I guess I'd like to believe it, but I was convinced otherwise. Adriana had a recent love anyway, as evidenced by the presence of her little girl, Betty. The woman had a look on my face. A slight, gentle smile appeared on her face. 15 minutes later, she got up and left the room. At this point, I rolled over onto my back, put my hands behind my head, opened my eyes, and stared up at the ceiling. At first, I just didn't know how to act. It was because I couldn't decide what I felt for this beautiful woman. Fragments of last night's flawless and passionate night began to appear in my mind. For a moment, I fell out of reality and only came back when Adriana appeared in front of my face with a tray in her hands. The fragrant smell of coffee wafted through the room. "Good morning, honey," the woman said casually. The way she addressed me made me speechless. I could only reward her with a slight smile. I hope that at that moment she thought that I didn't answer her only because I had just woken up. "David, calm down. I can see in your eyes that you're really stressed out about last night. Relax. We're adults. We did what we wanted to do. This whole fake marriage thing really got on your nerves. Your mother didn't give us a hard time last night. If you thought I didn't realize it, I'm offended that you think I'm so stupid. Come on, wake up. The coffee will get cold, and it won't be so refreshing. I know something else that'll perk you up in the morning. I didn't expect myself to say it. I'm embarrassed to ask what it is. Did I ask you to put the breakfast tray on my nightstand? There was a look of bewilderment on her face. It amused me even more when her hands were free. I grabbed her wrists and pulled her down onto the bed. The woman was pleasantly surprised. She was smiling and laughing. I continued to do what I hadn't had time to finish during the night. Yes, the night was very short indeed. If it were up to me, I wouldn't have gotten out of bed for 3 days. Maybe she's expressing something in another way. There's no way I can explain the irresistible attraction. My lips explored every inch of her body. I wanted her to feel how hot they were. Her body responded to every kiss I gave her. Goosebumps covered her skin. Her legs, her arms trembled slightly. I don't think I'd ever turned on a woman this hard before yesterday. Yes, it was beautiful. That's how our morning went. Of course, by the time we were done making love, the coffee was already icy, figuratively speaking. To be honest, I didn't care for it at all. I began to catch myself thinking that I felt more than comfortable in the company of this beautiful woman. It was obvious that she had absolutely no regrets. I wondered if she had any feelings for me. Why does she always act like nothing happened? Or is that how it's supposed to be? It's not how it's supposed to be. And there were thoughts going through my head all the time. Sometimes I felt like I was mumbling to myself. Maybe I was. Because after a few minutes of silence, Adriana said, "I told you not to fall in love with me." After saying that, I'm seething. Indeed, she did say that. How could she have known it would end up like this? Why are you looking at me like that? David, when you pushed me in the park, I could see from your face that you liked me. I didn't take your request seriously at first. I thought you were just looking for an excuse to meet me. But after just an hour, I realized you weren't lying. You really wanted to give your mother a show like this. I'm sure it didn't look the same in your head. And you may be surprised now, but in my head, it ended up exactly the way it did. Do you really want to talk about the fact that it was written all over my face that in just a few days you and I would be lying in the same bed together? No, not that literally. I could tell by the look on your face that you didn't mind waking up in bed with me. God, why do you look so scared? Do I look like a witch to you? Relax, I'm not a witch, just very perceptive women. At that moment, I was really in shock. My state of mind was not due to being shrewd, but because she was indeed right. After all, it was then that I chose Adriana from the crowd, not because she looked like a hostess, but because she was unrealistically attractive against the rest. Agree that when you choose your bride, even an efficient one, you would still want her to be beautiful and attractive. That's why I made a mistake. Instead of Adriana, I should have stopped my eyes on some gray, unremarkable mouse. And to make Mom happy, this mouse had to be younger than me, but not by much. Although I don't know what would have to happen for my mom to be happy with my choice. She would probably be pleased only in one case, if she herself had chosen a bride for me from all her students, daughters, friends, nurses, from the district polyclinic. Well, to hell with it, whatever happens. After all, I'm not going to marry her. It's not like I'm a teenager who loses his head to the first woman who gives him a mind-blowing night. But also the morning, of course. I got out of bed, not even bothering to cover myself with something she didn't see there. Walking over to Adriana, I slapped her. I couldn't resist. She's got a delicious figure, I'll give her that. What are we going to do? Shy like a boy? I asked the woman who was stirring my emotions. With what? David, just because we slept together. Even if more than once does not mean that between us urgently need to tie the relationship. It's not going to happen against our will. Are you against it? Aya, honey, you are the one who hired me for a fake relationship, not me. With a gentle smile, Adriana said. There was some confusion on my face. I couldn't find the words to say because I didn't know what expressions of feelings would be appropriate in this situation. Why are you looking at me so guiltily? David, We are well into our 20s. Moreover, well into our 35th decade. You realize how much that phrase terrifies me. But nevertheless, we have the right to do whatever we want and sleep with whomever we want. So what's wrong with that? How can you even say that? It was fantastic. You're an excellent lover and, frankly, a good woman. Unexpectedly, I blurted it out to Adriana. It's all out in the open. At that moment, I felt like a boy in front of an experienced adult woman because her face didn't show an ounce of confusion. She knew she was good. I was turned on and annoyed at the same time by her self-confidence. Adriana, I'm going to confess to you, even though I don't know what to confess. I really don't know how I feel about you. I don't think I've ever felt this way in my entire life. I just don't know what it is. But then, so be it. She said with a smile. What life will lead to, that we will be happy. But I'll keep my promise anyway. Your mother will be fooled. Even if we don't have a real relationship, it's already a matter of principle for me. She's so old. And your son didn't think so at all this night, Adriana said. I rolled in laughter. I realized that if it was not love, it was obvious adoration. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I never thought that in my old age I would sincerely give flowers and gifts to someone. Adriana and I met 2 or 3 times a week. I didn't want it to be just sex. I knew I wanted something more. I took her out on dates to the best restaurants in town, to last-minute movies, to the theater. I wanted our relationship to be romantic. I knew that sooner or later the candy bouquet period would end, so I wanted it to bring as many positive experiences as possible. Everything was pretty good, but just one thought kept me on my toes. I didn't understand how Adriana felt about me. She was acting dignified, and I would even say reserved. She had never been known for her warmth. In words, in behavior, only when we were in the bedroom. She was ready for me like an affectionate cat. Nightly flings allowed me to let all my emotions out: love, passion, jealousy, anger, and resentment at her coldness. Yes, I did fall in love with her. It took me about 3 weeks to realize it. The realization came the day I woke up in the morning in my apartment, turned on my other side, hoping to hug Adriana. But the other half of the bed was empty. I hoped she had woken up earlier and was now in the kitchen making coffee. I couldn't smell the coffee aroma. However, after going through all the rooms, I realized she wasn't in the apartment. I picked up my phone and found a message on it. Sorry, urgent business. She left. Didn't even have a family yet. I'll see you next week. In that moment, somewhere in my chest, it felt like I had a red-hot spear stabbed into my heart. Why was her message so aloof? Why was she so distant from me? Do I not arouse in her an ounce of tender feeling? I was ready to tear the whole place apart. I realized that I wanted her around me all the time. Not a couple days a week, but 24/7. Why has no other woman in my life ever evoked such feelings in me? Why does she accept my advances? She sleeps with me, but she's not affectionate. I had 1,000 questions, but I guess I was never going to get answers. All this time, we no longer went to visit my mother. In fact, I could have brought any girl to her in whom she would have immediately found 1,000 flaws. After that conversation, my mother told me that she no longer wanted us at her place, and she also disapproved of my choice. Even if we get married, my mother will not come to the celebration, so as not to once again be upset about how old my spouse is. Can you imagine this from my mother, who has been hoping for years for some woman to take me in? And here she was with one of the best options, and still she's not happy. Women, they're nothing but trouble. That's true. Until I had Adriana in my life, the only trouble was with my mother. But now there's 2 of them, and I lost all sense of ground. I just stopped having confidence in the future. I decided that I would no longer call or write Adriana myself. I'll admit it was unrealistic hard. I wanted to ask the neighbors to tie my hands behind my back, but then I decided it wouldn't help. If I wanted to, I would have typed a message to her, but I held on with all my might to get her out of my head for a moment. I started to drink a little too much alcohol just to relax and stop catching the train of thought that was keeping me from resting. 3 days later, a text came to my phone late at night. I was already asleep, but decided to read it as usually no one texted me this late. It was a message from her telling me to stand under the door, and I jumped up like scalded. I didn't immediately realize she was standing outside my apartment. I was trying to get my room in order, grabbing a bunch of stuff and throwing it into my closet. I'm sure she heard all of that. I could directly feel her standing outside the door, smiling. 5 minutes later, at least I didn't think it had been more than that, and I flew up to the front doors, barred by my hair sticking out. Opening the door, I saw Adriana. She was marvelously beautiful. In her hand, she held a bottle of semi-sweet red wine. "Did you clean up?" Adriana asked, smiling. "I didn't. I was just sleeping. I didn't immediately realize you were standing outside my apartment." I started making excuses like a kid. "Yeah, who was running around your apartment at breakneck speed and banging on the closet doors?" "Adriana, why would it make you feel better if I told you I did a little scatterbrain?" "Of course it would make me feel better, but your little bit, that's a lie. A little is no more than 5 minutes. I've been standing here for 20. You have. Oh God, I'm sorry. But why are you standing on the doorstep? Come on in. If you had invited me in sooner, we wouldn't have had to work things out in the common hallway," Adriana said. I sensed she was annoyed. I wanted to beg her forgiveness, but I didn't. I still had some pride left in me. Why should I apologize? If we'd made an appointment beforehand, everything would have been top-notch. She knew that, but now she just showed up unannounced, and I was beginning to wonder why. "Maybe you were here with your mistress. Is that it?" She was getting jealous. Confidence started to spread. Confidence began to spread throughout her body. "Or maybe you were a beer drinker or something," I asked the woman. A smug smile began to appear on my face. "I'm jealous. Who do you take me for? What am I? 15 years old? I was just asking. I just wanted to tell you that if you're ever with a girl and I show up uninvited, just don't open the door. Text me. I'll understand. You're entitled to have fun whenever and with whomever you want." She was clearly unhappy that I caught her being jealous, but I understood. Finally, after all this time, she was mine. I wanted to keep playing this game, but I was afraid I'd overdo it. She'd get angry and leave. That's not what I wanted. I demanded her constant presence around me. Walking over to her, I gently brushed a strand of hair out of her face and tucked it behind her ear. My hand slowly descended from her head, Natalia, all the while she looked at me without running. At one point, it seemed to me that what stood in front of me was not a grown woman, but a girl of about 18. She desired me. I could tell. Her shyness repulsed me a little. After all, I had never noticed this quality in the moments of our encounters. I couldn't hold back long and kissed her. God, how long had I waited for this? The few days we hadn't seen each other seemed like an eternity. Her coldness made me think that she didn't care about me. But now I realize I was wrong. She tried to deceive me, but her body says otherwise. I'll leave out what happened next. I'll just say it was wonderful. It was like having our first time again. "Adriana, why are you trying to pretend?" I asked her as she lay on my chest.